Well, the urban neighborhoods are often known more for the bad things that are happening there than the good. Our next guest is a leading force for a very positive change in our city's neighborhoods. George Spencer is the president of Greater Pittsburgh Mad Dads. Also, Mad Dads is a Cornerstone Cares partner. George, welcome to Real Life.
George.
Thank you.
Oh my, what a pleasure to have you. I had the privilege of attending the banquet, the fundraising banquet a few weeks ago, and I have to tell you, the table where I was sitting, it was Cornerstone people, we were just absolutely blown away by what God is doing through your organization.
Well, I tell you, first of all, we are so appreciative of being a partner that you've chosen to sow into Greater Pittsburgh Area Mad Dads. We're a small grassroots organization, and when anyone does what you're doing, it greatly empowers us to move forward and do what we do.
Yeah. George,
Yes.
what do you do? What Mad Dads? That could be like, I'm mad, or are you glad dads? You know, what is Mad Dads?
Well, it's actually an acronym. That term, Mad Dads, is an acronym. It stands for Men Against Destruction, Defending Against Drugs and Social Disorder. And, you know, there is the issue of not being happy about the types of things that the name implies. You know, illegal drug sales, drugs that destroy people, destroy families, destroy communities. I mean, as long as it perpetuates and keeps going, it's not a healthy outcome for what that does. Then you compound that with social disorder, you know, forms of violence, degrading property, those types of things. Well, those aren't things to be happy about. And Mad Dads, as an organization, you know, takes the position that you can't be passive about allowing those kind of decadent things to take place in your household. One starts there, or in anything within your sphere. In the community, and we want that sphere to get real large. That, hey, you know, we want to expand to get our arms around as much of this as we can.
George, you very intentionally say that you're not an organization, you're a movement.
Well, that was what came forth from the founders. They believed that this is something that needed to expand, and as they said, a movement which would be beyond the scope of just being an organization. And that's right. Yes.
How important is it for the men to rise up in their communities and really become like the fathers in the neighborhoods?
Well, biblically speaking, in my opinion, we don't have a option that's
right.
to be other than that. The word of the Lord says in the last days, we'll just start there. The hearts of the fathers will turn to the children, and the hearts of the children will turn to the fathers. And I believe in the King James even goes so far as to say, well, I'll strike the land with a curse. There's something real important to God about this issue. And the father role, obviously, you know, is imperative when it comes to relationship with children. And when it's absent, it's a problem for whatever reason. If the biological father, for whatever reason, sometimes dad dies at an early age for whatever reason he's not there, some surrogate dad needs to show up from somewhere. And in a sense, that's what we consider ourselves, to be surrogate fathers, surrogate dads in the community.
That's awesome.
And frankly speaking, we found that, you know, that can be in itself initial challenge, because dad, with some people, is the worst word you can bring up, because in so many instances, men have failed. Okay, and so there needs to be an intentional action on behalf from moral men, saved men, Christian men in particular, really need to be about what our faith says to do.
Movements begin out of a need. How did this wonderful ministry begin here in Pittsburgh?
Well, here in Pittsburgh, the genesis started with myself. What basically had happened, there had been some issues in my own family. And I'll start with my generation. In my generation, we've had people that have died from drug overdoses. That has happened. We've had people that sold drugs. We've had people that have been murdered, and we've had people that have murdered people. Now, that being said, we're kind of balanced out with the extremes to the other end. There are people that are preachers and everything else that go on in the church as well in my generation. So everybody wasn't either or. But I began to see evidence that in the oncoming generation of my children and their peers in the family, there had been some situations that had gone on that Mad Dad stands against, and it became a tipping point from within my own family first that something that's got under my radar here. How did this happen? And then in the neighborhood where we live, on the street where the elementary school where the children had attended, I was about 49 years old at the time in 2004. And you see things differently when you walk than just driving through the community.
Yeah.
And there was an occasion where I walked down this particular street for some reason on a particular day, and this teenager, neighborhood of 14, 15 years old, says to me, "Are you looking?" And my beard was thicker than it is now. Wasn't quite as gray, but there was gray getting in there. And I was really disturbed. I was incensed. You got the nerve to ask me, if I'm looking for anything illegal. Right. And the look on my face shook him up a little bit. He started running. I chased him about a half a block. I said, "Son, you better get your life. You better turn around. You're about to get arrested. You're about to get killed out here." Right. On that street, there had been a number of murders because of this kind of activity that was regularly taking place. Right. And I began to see that this is a pretty entrenched situation here. Mm-hmm. So what happened, a community organization, a Community Empowerment Association, had an event where a speaker named Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu was speaking. And he had a book out at the time. It's titled Positive Solutions for the Black Community. And I told my wife, we were together, let's get that book. And it talked about how there was an organization that went from theory to practice to address the issues of the out-of-control behavior of young men 14 to 25 years old that were doing those types of things. Mm-hmm. And the violence that was going on in some communities where people couldn't sit comfortably on the porch or just enjoy the neighborhood as it once did. Mm-hmm. And that organization's name was Mad Dads. I'm a member of Covenant Church of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And on one of our outreaches, as Covenant's a very socially active church, we had done an outreach in a nearby community in Homewood. The church is located in Wilkinsburg. And our pastor had declared on one of those outreach openly in the community that some things in this community are not going to change until the men start walking the streets. Yes. Right. And so when this Mad Dads information came to me and I saw where they walk the streets, I said, well, maybe let me talk to him for two reasons. One, I had an angry thing going on within me. That bothered me when that youngster approached me. It bothered me what was happening with young people in my own family, some of them. And I had a sense that I needed to get out on a perimeter. That was something that it came to me. Wow. But I said, I better talk to him so that I'm accountable to my pastor. I don't want to hear later, why did you get involved with this before, and it's something he wouldn't approve of. Right. And when he took a look at the information, he liked it. What I didn't expect was when he said, hey, George, will you be the point man on this? And I'm like, boy. And the issue with that was this. A couple of years before that, I had discontinued all volunteer service. Because I recognized I needed to be more diligent in certain areas within my family. Right. And actually, my pastor was one of the people that stood with me there. He said, George, if there's anything I can do, I commend you for what you're doing. Then this comes up, and it began to be something that when I thought about it, he also teaches us opportunities to serve seldom come at convenient times. And it was one of the best decisions I've made in my life to go forward with my wife to help bring this organization into Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's
Wow.
awesome.
How did we get involved?
Well, I tell you, first of all, let me say this. The mission, the signature program is what we call neighborhood street patrols. We're looking for strong drug-free men to do that. We're not looking for people that are going to be aggressive on the streets. What we're looking for are people that are brokenhearted about what's going on in the streets.
Amen.
The best Mad Dads are men who are brokenhearted about what's going on in the streets. In fact, the founding fathers articulated it this way. They said, Mad Dads began out of pain. The pain of children dying in the streets of their own communities.
Yes.
And you know, they took a look at that and said, we allowed this to happen. Okay? And so they united as a small group of fathers. They said, we must be the force behind the change. Okay, so that's the heart of Mad Dads right there. Are you willing to get in the gap in neighborhoods where that kind of activity, where a youngster can just freely walk up to a grown man and ask you, are you looking for something illegal that you know he could go to jail for? That product can kill somebody, that this individual can go to prison, you know, that they're on the wrong course. And just be willing to engage. Be willing to be what we call the outstretched hand of reason. That's what this logo is about.
That's right.
The outstretched hand of reason and the fist of determination. So we're not going to stand here and allow that. You're going to have to jump over us, run around us, hide from us to do that. We're not going to let that happen. And so that's one thing we're looking for. On the other end, we have a mom's division. The mom's division's role is to deal with the spiritual and moral training of children and to develop programs around that. That's how the event that you attended came about. It was to raise money for scholarships so that we can empower young people that want to go on to some form of a higher education. You know, it can't be all what we're against. There also needs to be, well, this is what we're for. You know, this is what you can be. This is what, you know, we're encouraging you to be. Discouraging this, encouraging that.
That's awesome. Well, we have a lot more that we want to talk about and some wonderful stories of victory that God is giving you. So we have more with George in a moment. Well, if you're just joining us, we're back with more conversation with George Spencer, the president of Mad Dads, and about how they are putting the neighbor back in the hood. God has been blessing your ministry.
Yes, he has, absolutely.
Tell us a story of one of the victories that God's blessed you.
Well, let me begin by saying this as well. Mad Dads, in being Christian, also embraces, because our signature program is Neighborhood Street Patrol, all fathers that are willing to get in the gap and deal with street-level problems. So if somebody's breaking in your house, you want somebody to call the police. You want somebody to get involved. And so in that respect, people that may not be Christian, but they say, look, we want to be a part of helping to make this happen, are involved. And we need everyone in order to accomplish what we do. And let me give you an example here of a story that came to life for me. I had initially asked one of the founding fathers, Bishop Robert Tyler, when he came to do training with us, what's the difference between street patrol and evangelism? And he said, well, George, you know, most churches or people I know that do evangelism, they got tracts or what have you, and they give them out and they pray for people, and that needs to happen. But you can't have the dope dealer selling drugs right across the street from the church, and somebody not eventually at some point say, look, we're not going to have this, okay? Well, we love you and we even come see you in jail. I mean, that's exactly how he put it to me. And, you know, to give you an example, it came to life for me one day when we were on what we call street patrol, and some friends of mine, the members of a particular church, was getting ready to do an outreach. A number of men were there. It's a nice day. And they said, yeah, we're going to be feeding people today. We got sandwiches made, et cetera, et cetera. And one of our members, in fact, he was a men's ministry leader where I go to church. He said, George, there's somebody in that house across the street. And there's a vacant house over there, and I don't see anybody. So I said, hey, you see anybody over there? Oh, no, we've been out here a couple of hours. Nobody's over there. And this went on about 3 times. I was getting a little annoyed with him. By the 3rd time, George, there's somebody in that house. So finally, I said, okay, to satisfy him, let's go over there. As soon as we got behind the bushes, it was like a hornet's nest. A guy was getting ready to looked like it probably was crack, in somebody's hand that was a peer of ours, a grown man. He got excited, they got excited. People started running all over the place. I mean, there were high porches on that street, and a number of people come running out of this house. Now, I'm not saying this to disparage the folks that were going to do what did need to happen with that outreach, but the street patrol is intentionally looking for this type of thing and disrupting it. That's the difference, and both things need to happen. Right. And so by us continuing to come to that location, that was a weekly thing. We had to keep, every week, keep coming back. We get to the point where the guys doing that would be, oh, Mad Dads again. Oh, Mad Dads again. Now, you really don't know initially what the level of the impact is. But that same location where I'm talking about, a couple of years ago, and now we're going back to 2006, 2007, 2008, where we're hitting that area. I met a young man a couple of years ago, and was part of a Bible study I was a part of. And when I was introduced to him, the person said, do you know George Spencer? He's part of Mad. Oh, yeah, I know about Mad Dads. And he went on to say, yeah, I had quit selling drugs around the time Mad Dads had started coming around. And the guys I used to hang out with, they were like, oh, man, those mad dudes are out. And he said, what? Those mad dudes, they wear these green shirts, and they come on the corner, and we can't make any money. And they were livid, And when he said that, I said, my goodness, this is interesting to hear. But, they needed somebody to be that in their life. You should not be comfortable to do that kind of activity. That's right. And so it was refreshing to hear. And, so that let me know, okay, all right, we assumed it, because for the most part, drug dealer, real one, is going to leave the area. It doesn't want exposure. Right. And that's another reason someone needs to show up. On the violence end of the thing, and I'll just say this, Wilkinsburg was a weed and seed community that got disbanded under Governor Corbett. There's no longer the weed and seed program, but we were a favored organization of weed and seed, and one of the reasons why is because we stopped things. There was an occasion, there was a basketball game. Okay, one of our members found out through another outreach worker with another organization that there was likely to be a problem at this ball game. So a couple of guys went. He and the outreach worker actually was a member of Mad Dads, and he was an outreach worker with someone else. And I was at a banquet, actually, with the mayor of Wilkinsburg. And I get this phone call, and he says, we're outnumbered. This thing is going to go down here. There's about 15 young men they're clearly, a violent group, and just something's going to break out here. So I let the mayor know. So we both left. He went and, of course, got his police department. We were able to come up with 3 more fathers, so there's a total of 5 of us there. But what happened, because someone was willing to take a stand, the guy that called me went to the principal, and he let him know. These guys right over here came from the home side, came over here. That one's the ringleader, and I'm telling you, something's going to happen. So what the principal does, he put him on notice. I'm holding you accountable if anything happens here. Just to get to the highlights of this event, when the game ended, they held all of the home side at the door, okay? And they weren't happy about it. You know, so we had 2 guys stand there and take all the epithets and all of that stuff that people were throwing at them.
Sure.
We got outside. One of our guys took a brick right off a girl's hand. He was getting ready to hit a girl with a brick. Somebody sprayed some mace out there. It was a chaotic situation, and there were a group that wanted to get a smaller group, and we stayed in the middle. We escorted them basically home. But the thing that I'm getting to with all of this that went on, when at the end of the night, the mayor and his special operations unit talked with us, and a police officer at that special operations unit said, "I can't believe nothing happened in that gym." He said, "Those guys were throwing gang signs all over the place. I can't believe nothing." He didn't think he was the reason it didn't happen, because the police have come into situations, and if it's enough going on, it just goes on. And I said, "Prince of Peace, I'm not under some illusion that just because we put a shirt on and go into a situation like that, that it's going to have that outcome." But we went in there, folks were praying for us. My wife knew we were going. The people at that table knew we were going. It was, frankly speaking, a Hosanna House dinner. And so that word was getting around. People were praying, and that was the outcome. But God said, "I do need somebody to go."
That's right.
You know, you can pray, but who's going to go?
Daniel.
Who's going to be standing for the Prince of Peace? Who's the ambassador on the ground in the place? You know, and so those are the kind of outcomes that go on. And I'll tell you another one, because people want to, oh yeah, well, what about the gunfire? Okay, that's a juvenile fight. What about the gunfire? And we had a situation where, again, same corner that we kept hitting every week. Some young men from another community. Frankly, I'm from the North Braddock area. I grew up out there. I live in Wilkinsburg now. And some young men from that area came over and were shooting at some guys in Wilkinsburg on that corner. And myself and another guy that's from that area, we went down there the next morning. They had collected 40-something bullet shells in that area. And, you know, I'm an Army veteran, not combat vet, but I found it interesting that whoever these guys were on the Wilkinsburg side were taking fire and stood in there and were returning fire, and that says something to me. But when we went down and began to talk with these guys, one, the store owner's walking around, and he was a young man who was part of the problem, with a pistol on his hip, just openly walking around like Wyatt Earp or something. And so my friend, Reverend Stoudemire, said to him, "Well, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? We got children out here and whatnot," but he's been doing this all morning. Nobody's saying anything to him. And let him know that you're part of the problem here. But one of the guys there made a comment. He said, "Who's talking to them? Who's talking to those guys that came over here?" And so what he said to me was, "We won't go over there, but they better not come back here." So what I did from my end, I'm from that community. I called my barber. "Who do you think would do something like this?" And he told me, well, where they probably hang out at. And we went there. We went and engaged them. Because I'm from there, and my last name's recognizable, I had nephews that were star athletes in that community, so they hear the name. It's a name they know. They relaxed, and we began to talk about it. And that gunfire discontinued. But the barber told me, "George, I've cut 3 guys' head this week that have been shot in Wilkinsburg from over here." And so he began to pour into them and talk to them. And there's a lot of need for things like the things that our faith teaches: forgiveness, reconciliation, and those types of things. But somebody has to get in there and be a conduit to that conversation.
Praise
So
God.
good.
Praise
Thank you so
God.
much, George, for just sharing. What you're doing on the streets is really powerful. And I just sense if you're in one of those communities and you're seeing that happening if you're experiencing that trauma, we want you to call into our prayer line. If what George is saying and you're saying, I'm seeing this in my community and I want to join forces with George because I want to make a difference, I want to stand and be an example of the Prince of Peace, call our prayer line. And we have prayer partners standing by that want to pray with you.